Hello, I'm ETarte, once a Catholic priest for 5 years in the 1960s, now an atheist, which simply means I find no credible evidence for the existence of any God. This is the 50th in my series of weekly videos for friendlyatheist.com. What can a weekly TV show or radio program or internet person do when they run low on new, fresh ideas but want to try to keep the weekly series going? If they have archives of good, interesting material, they can do one or more reruns. I have made over 250 religion videos. Some of the ones that have generated the most interest are autobiographical. Probably one of the most interesting of these is the one that I am now going to revisit, and I invite you to join me. I will add a few details. I entitled the video, "When Priests Don't Get Along." This is a follow-up to some of my other videos, including my priestly bubble video, describing my first 3 years of my 5-year priesthood, serving as one of 2 assistant pastors at a church in a wealthy section of Houston, Texas. Our pastor, an apparently pleasant middle-aged man, was happy to have me and my fellow priest, both of us in our late 20s, as his assistants. So happy was he, in fact, that one evening on our behalf he violated one of his own rules. The rule was, one of us 3 would always be on duty in our residence, the rectory, in case any parishioner would need emergency spiritual assistance. The Catholic Church required us to believe that a priest's presence at the side of a dying Catholic might make the difference between the person going to heaven or going to hell. There was not and is not any evidence to support this doctrine, but we all had to believe it. Well, one night the pastor took me and my fellow assistant to eat dinner at an expensive restaurant, leaving the rectory with no one there. On another occasion, the 10 or so nuns who taught at the parish school invited the 3 of us to eat dinner with them at their residence, the convent. Our pastor agreed, again leaving nobody at home at the rectory that evening. Those occasions took place during the first year or so of my priesthood, when the pastor was happy with us. But on one occasion, I offered to do the weekly grocery shopping, which the pastor habitually did. He willingly let me do it, but at dinner a few days later, he became angry with me for having bought pork chops of medium quality instead of highest quality. More seriously, a deepening rift gradually developed between him and us 2 assistants because of the Cursillo movement. A Cursillo was, and apparently still is, a weekend retreat for about 30 Catholic men, perhaps men not strong in their faith, a retreat directed by a priest, the purpose being to get these men fired up and truly enthusiastic about their Catholic religion. My fellow assistant, who had much charisma, quickly became active in Cursillo activities, and this made it necessary for him to be absent from the parish on one occasion from Friday evening through the following Sunday evening. This meant that the pastor had to hire an outside priest, such as a priest from the seminary, to come and help with confession Saturday afternoon and say 2 of the Sunday masses. This necessity infuriated our pastor. Now, Cursillo activities were fully supported by our bishop, so my fellow assistant was entirely within his rights to do some Cursillo work. Somebody had to do it. But our pastor didn't see it that way. Since I was a good preacher and had some youthful enthusiasm, I too got involved in Cursillo activities, and that doubled the fury of our pastor. In his judgment, my fellow assistant and I were being disloyal to our parish, even though our decision to extend our ministry outside the parish had the implicit support of our bishop. On one weekend, Friday evening through Sunday evening, I was the director of a Cursillo and therefore absent from the parish. At the Cursillo retreat facility, I said Mass for the participants, I sang songs with them, I ate with them, I gave a bunch of talks to them, including a prescribed talk that lasted 4 hours. Looking back on that, I don't know how I did it, but I did it. On Sunday, after plenty of these activities to get them all fired up, I heard their confessions. Typically for adult confessions, these were heavy on sexual thought crimes, which Catholics from teenage through adulthood understood could very easily send a person to hell. The closing Cursillo hour on Sunday evening was an emotional blend of eating, singing, and spontaneous testimonials from the participants. And I did all this directing of the Cursillo without any solid evidence to support anything I was doing. That, of course, was the bottom line of my entire priestly life. Meanwhile, back at the parish, my pastor was seething with anger. From his perspective, he had a point. But from my perspective, I had a lot of free time on my hands at the parish, and I greatly wanted to have a truly active ministry. My pastor complained to the bishop. The bishop then assigned to the parish a third assistant pastor, who had been one of my classmates in the seminary and whose personality had always rubbed me the wrong way. The pastor hired contractors at considerable expense to convert part of our large dining space into a fourth office for this third assistant pastor. Life at our rectory had become quite tense. The honeymoon was definitely over. Our meals together were no longer the happy experiences they had once been. In due time, the bishop transferred both of us, my fellow assistant pastor and me, away from that church. I was moved to a very different environment, a church in downtown Houston. By then, other influences in my life had begun to penetrate my priestly bubble that I describe in that other video. And after 2 more priestly years, I escaped from the priesthood and from the evil grip of the Catholic Church. I stopped living a worthless, useless life and started a new, worthwhile existence as a math teacher, still at it now, 43 years later. By the way, concerning my fellow assistant pastor, with whom I had joined in causing our pastor's fury, and who was probably one of the most charismatic, active, and exuberant priests in the entire Galveston-Houston Catholic Diocese. He also left the priesthood shortly after I left. And sooner or later, so did a bunch of my fellow seminarians, at least a dozen that I know of, probably more. Each departure must have greatly saddened and angered the priests at the seminary, who had devoted so many hundreds of thousands of man-hours and so much effort to train us to become priests and to remain priests for the rest of our lives. About the time that my fellow assistant pastor and I left that parish, our pastor had a heart attack. He blamed it on the 2 of us. Indeed, we may have had some responsibility for it. I have no way of knowing. Our pastor smoked. He did not know or practice anything about eating healthy, and he did not do any physical exercise whatsoever. He survived the heart attack. To all of you, thank you for watching this video.